From the bench to the bleachers, you are listening to the only podcast in Ontario that keeps you in the game.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, let's do this.
My next guest is a Canadian basketball coach from the province of Quebec that is currently the assistant coach for the Raptors 905. He was the ABL Coach of the Year in China, Charles Dubé-Brais. Charles, you are in the game. Perfect, Charles. Awesome. Thank you for jumping on the show. I'm sure my little guy, he's a little nervous. Will probably approach us at some point when we're chatting here. Anyways, I just wanted to kick things off. I'm glad to have you on. You're kind of the first in the sport of basketball. One, I wanted to touch base with somebody who's Canadian. That's obviously got some ties with the Raptors organization. But I also want to pinpoint the development of basketball in Canada, like the growth of the game and how it's taken off. You and I have a few years between ourselves. I'm 41. You're probably a couple years younger. So where did someone like yourself get into the game of basketball? How did that start for you?
In my case, I can say I'm a little bit of the part of the Dream Team generation, 1992. That's about when I started to play basketball, and a lot of kids who, were typically growing up with hockey and baseball in Canada, a little bit of football as well. But I'd say the game of basketball and soccer kind of grew up more in the 90s and early 2000s. So I was part of that generation. Picked up a basketball at that point and just never really stopped. I tried to play as far as I could. And then eventually I realized that I wanted to be a coach, and I kept doing that, and still going on today.
So your influence is obviously your Dream Team, early 90s. So I'm going to have to guess that somewhere in the mid 90s, or when Vince Carter came into Canada, did that have a factor as well into the game for you, or were you already embedded into the game before Vince and before the Raptors made their appearance in the NBA?
I was embedded before Vince. I mean, when Vince came into the NBA in 1999, I was 17, going to turn 18 at that point. I had been playing for 5 or 6 years. It was already my true passion. I was building my identity around that. So Vince came at a point where I was really passionate about the game, and he just helped take the game to another level. But I can't say that I'm part of the generation that started to play basketball because of him and the growth of the Raptors.
Yeah. So there's no doubt that the past 12 months has exploded, and we'll probably see something in the next decade to 12 to 15 years in Canada with the growth of the game of basketball. Would you agree on that?
For sure. I mean, I think it's taken it to a whole new level right now, because we've seen that the popularity of the game after the Raptors Championship. I mean, there was Raptors mania all around country, from one ocean to the other, and the game was already popular, and you could feel in the last few years that the game was building steam in terms of the number of players that were reaching the highest level playing in the NBA. So you could feel a little bit of that, but I think that right now, since the Raptors won, a lot of kids are just tempted to go and play basketball right away, and it's starting to be pretty far back that any other Canadian team has had that much success as well. So it's easy to like whoever's successful in life, and I think the Raptors are no exception to that.
Yeah, I have to agree. The big push in the last few years now, these young guys that went through Duke and all these big powerhouse NCAA programs that are going fairly high in the NBA draft that are Canadian. I mean, those guys may have grew up on Vinsanity and all that stuff. But those guys transitioning into the league now, or even current NCAA Division I powerhouse players coming out of Canada, and the championship of the Raptors, can only improve our national team and, like you said, the growth of the game, because Hockey tends to be pretty expensive. Baseball is getting up there as well with the cost of the travel teams, even around Toronto or across the province. Even soccer was the thing of, hey, it's a cheaper sport, but even the cost with soccer seems to be climbing through the roof. Do you see? I mean, I know there's costs and challenges across the board with development, with basketball, with kids getting into it, but do you see it being a financial easy for families to do, and because of the costs associated, it will also help expand the growth of the game?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, part of the popularity of the game across the world is related to its low cost. Like, for sure, it's a, anyone can pick up a basketball and go shoot hoops, just like you can do in soccer, and it's a lot harder to have access to an ice rink and the hockey equipment or that kind of stuff. So it's a good comparison right there, and obviously that plays a role. I mean, not that it's completely cheap to play basketball, because you have more and more programs who will, charge you a certain amount of money to be on a travel team, that kind of thing. But you can, bail your way out of it a little bit with your skill level. I mean, if you're good, you're going to be able to find a travel team and probably not pay for it. So it will not prevent the top talent from reaching certain levels and eventually reach Division I basketball in the States and become professional basketball players. But certainly the growth of the game is something that you can't go around. Like, there's more and more kids playing, and I feel like it's more and more a natural thing for a young Canadian to pick up basketball as your first sport. Like, I'm seeing it more and more in Ontario, where I live right now, in my home province of Quebec. I mean, I see a lot of kids that it's literally the first thing they do is play basketball. And when I was growing up, that would never happen. It would always be like, first thing you would do is put on a pair of skates, play hockey, play baseball in the summer, and then eventually you could, turn yourself to basketball because it was part of the landscape, but it was just not as prominent as the other sports. So I feel that's where the main change has happened, where, people kind of pick up a basketball first, and some people in Canada now never pick up hockey, actually.
Yeah. And I'm going to say, I played a few years minor pro hockey in Europe. That's my background, but you're right. I actually did play fastball in the summer, and I played baseball in the summer. And, I messed around with the hoops, but I had buddies that were into basketball, and my son tried baseball. Wasn't for him. Tried football, did pretty, good for 1 year, but just didn't take the interest. Somewhere along the line, he got the basketball in his hands. He had a glow on his face. The Raptors won during that time that he was picking up the game. And the past year, was a starting point guard in grade 7 for his school team. So, and he was the leader on the team. And for him, that was a confidence booster. For him, it was something that he could, grab and take a hold of and say, this is something that I want to do for me. And I'm starting to see kids down the block do the same as well. We know some kids, and we're Caucasian, but down the street there's an Asian family, there's an East Indian family, and they're all playing basketball. So it tells you how it's a universal sport, and people are coming together for that sport, especially in Canada. How has the game changed when you went into coaching? You coached in Europe, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So how explain to me how you went that path, and how that path ended up leading you back to Mississauga, to the 905 Raptors, or the Raptors organization. How did that path kind of formulate for you? Where did it start?
I mean, I started by coaching high school here in Canada. We had a successful program in the school I was coaching at, and when it became clear that this was, what I wanted to do, what my goal was to be a full-time basketball coach and coach at the professional level, I knew that at some point I would probably have to go outside of Canada to do it, whether going through the, NCAA route by being like a graduate assistant on a team, and then maybe work my way up from there, which I actually tried to do. I applied at the University of Florida, got into their master's program, but actually ended up never going because I got offered a professional job here in Quebec City to be the head coach of the Quebec Kebs, which were the professional team back in the days in the American Basketball Association, then the Premier Basketball League, which transformed into the NBL Canada at some point. But then after a couple of years, I was, every year trying to do different basketball experiences around the world to meet with different coaches, learn some new stuff, make contacts. And then I got a call from a team in France that was offering me to join their youth academy and work with the professional team. So it was a good opportunity for me to do it and jump abroad and see what they did somewhere else. And that's how I moved to France in 2009 on a 1-year contract, which turned out to be an 8-year contract for being extended multiple times.
Yeah.
So, and the break I caught when I was over there is that our pro team became very successful. So we were a second division team to start with, and we won that division. And then in our second year in the top league, we won that league completely out of nowhere. We had the second lowest budget, I think, in the league, and just barely qualified for the playoffs, which was already a big surprise. And then, we're the number 8 seed, then we upset the number 1 team, and so on, and win the championship. So we play EuroLeague the year after that, which is the strongest league in the world after the NBA. And when that happened, we had a player on our team that got drafted by the Spurs, who played for us. He was stashed in Europe for a year. And then the Spurs came to see him, and I got familiar with a lot of the Spurs front office that year, eventually joined their program as their extended family, as they call, basically, being a guest coach on their summer league team and helping them out with whatever they needed. So I got connected with the NBA that way. And then took a 1-year detour through China in 2017-18 when I got offered a head coaching job out there in the ASEAN Basketball League through different references. But basically my time in Europe got me connected with a lot of NBA organizations, the Spurs mostly, but the Raptors were one of the other ones I had some good contacts with. And when the opportunity after China, the season went really well. And after that, they heard a little bit about my success over there, and my friend that was working for the Raptors just said, like, hey, we might have some spots available with the Raptors 905 program. It would be good for us to interview you and put you in touch with the new head coach, which had just been named at that point, with Jamo Malolela. So interviewed with Jamo, and that's how I ended up in Mississauga a couple of years ago. So that was basically a quick recap of my journey across the world to end up back in Canada.
Well, since Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment has kind of gobbled up everything, and you're seeing that in the sporting world, like in LA, same thing, right? I think the way that the management or the board of directors philosophy is, and I know Kyle Dubas from the Leafs from my hockey agency, with dealing with him when he was with the Sioux Greyhounds and the Leafs. And I know young, bright minds like that are what organizations are looking for. And, there's a philosophy of build within, drafting smart, but also being able to look for those free agent hidden gems. And it just seems like, the Raptors the last few years have had the right people around in the organization because they've been up top. And, it's tough, right? When you're competing with perennial powerhouses, it's, that Kawhi Leonard that you bring in, or there's the talk of, my son has his favorite player, one of his players over with Milwaukee, that Giannis is the talk of, like maybe he ends up in Toronto. But those pieces that you move in and out, as long as your core is strong and intact and players are coming up that are developing, and you're keeping players in the system, or you're signing and finding players and you're coaching them properly, you have that chance to be competitive year in and year out. And it takes smart minds, and it takes also, it takes old people, young people, it takes different ethnicities, it takes everybody that knows the game of basketball on an IQ level to come together and win a championship. Are you a big believer in that philosophy too, that it's everybody, right? I mean, it's the players do carry the workload, but it also takes some of the hours that you put in. Some people don't know the hours you put in, your head coaching staff puts in, developing young players, or even up at the Raptors level, the hours that is put in there from the general manager, the president, the coaching staff. It's to go through a whole season, and the sacrifices that you make from your family, that trophy and ring being in the organization and the party at the end was all worth it. But you're going to have your ups and downs. But I think the Raptors have been very consistent because they've had good people in the organization. Do you agree?
Yeah, for sure. I think, it starts with Masai Ujiri. I mean, there's a reason why he's, potentially the best president in all of sports right now and one of the hottest commodities out there. I mean, he's as good as they come in terms of having good people at every level of the organization, people that work extremely hard, but that care for the other people around them, create that family environment, and demand the best out of everyone at every level. Because like you mentioned, I think every piece of the puzzle might be a small piece in itself, but without it, the puzzle is not complete. So you need obviously Kawhi Leonard to make those great plays, but you need a great player development system in place so that Pascal Siakam becomes Pascal Siakam, or Fred VanVleet becomes Fred VanVleet. And without them, there's no championship parade last year. I mean, it's obviously people will notice more what Kawhi and Kyle Lowry do on a daily basis. But, and it's a good thing for us and for everybody to see that Pascal Siakam and Fred are becoming, big-time players themselves. Same for Norman Powell, guys that have been through the 905 program. But it's, when you put at a premium the fact that you want to have a great player development group, coaches that support that. And obviously, I'm no Nick Nurse. Like, I don't have the same role in the organization as he has. But I still try to do my job to the best of my ability, because I know that maybe my role is to fully develop the guy that will end up being the 13th or 12th or 11th player on the Raptors roster. But this guy might make a difference in a playoff game that may change a whole series. So you never know when these things will, what they will lead to. I don't think anyone knew how good, even if they hoped that he would be good. I don't think anyone knew how good Fred VanVleet was going to be when he was undrafted. But Fred works his ass off. He's has a great mindset.
His IQ, he's got an IQ for the game. Fred VanVleet.
Yes, yes, and a great mentality, like with which he approaches work and how he does things. So like, you're hoping if the Raptors are signing him as an undrafted guy, it's because they believe in his potential. But I don't think you can anticipate that he might be, averaging 18, 19 points a game a few years down the road. But he works hard, and there's a system in place to help him become that. We're there to support him and to fully become what he can become. So that's just one example. But all those examples, when they add up, they lead to success. And yes, championships, in the best case scenario, you need a little bit of luck to get there, like every organization. But I would say the sustained success part is no luck. The fact that the Raptors have been consistently good for the last 7 to 8 years now, that's no luck. Like when you win 50 games every year, it's because you must be doing something right. Like you're drafting well, you got the right people, you got people that, that do the right things consistently year in and year out at every level of the organization.
So you talked about Spicy P, and I learned all that from him, Pascal Siakam, Freddie, those guys that came through and developed. I think, we were going to get we saw the Raptors for the first time this year play. That was in Detroit. A friend of mine from Detroit got us tickets there that works for the city. We were down on the court after the game. We were going to get out to see the 905 Raptors this year, but then at the end of the season, everything kind of what was going on, it got clamped down. But moving forward, once everything opens up, we are looking at going. Now, I know my son, you talked about the players that you're developing. I think he wants to ask you a question about what it was like coaching those guys. I'll just hand him over. His name is Aaiden. Here you go, bud. And that microphone's right there. He's, like I said, he'd be a little nervous. I think what he wants to know is, when you're coaching there, for someone like you as a coach, what is it like when those young guys come in and they have the potential, and you're seeing someone like Pascal Siakam, or you're seeing, Freddie develop before your eyes, or Norman Powell? How much does that mean to you to get something special like that, where they're going to be special? And how much does it mean to you to see that transpire at the next level at the Raptors level in the NBA?
Well, it's a great source of pride, obviously, because you're doing it for the organization, but you're also trying to help human beings accomplish their full potential. So, for instance, last year, my first year with the 905, when I was given the responsibility of working with Chris Boucher very closely, like doing all the video work and the pregame workouts and that kind of stuff. Like Chris is from Montreal, like I'm from the province of Quebec, and I'm also trying to help a young Canadian kid from the same area as I am from to I think you're an NBA player. I can see it in you, and I want you to make it. Like I want you to have a successful NBA career. So Chris has that talent, and he reaches the NBA not because of myself, because of himself, because of the work he puts in and how he, works every day to get better and to be an NBA player. But you just hope that you can be part of that development by teaching him, hey, this is what you're doing right, this is what you're doing wrong. But down the road, I want you to be successful. Like that's what I do. And as a coach, there's no greater feeling than saying, well, I had this kid in my hands for a certain amount of time, and I feel like, I helped him take that next step. Like, does he, Pascal, Fred, these guys, you can't say, well, they did it because of us. They did it because of who they are, what the talent they have, the work ethic they have, the belief in themselves. Like Fred has that bet on yourself mentality that people know about. Like that's the motto he goes with, but that's true. Like he bets on himself. Like he's a guy that bets that if he works hard, if he puts in the time, he's going to get there, and it's not in anyone's hands but his. So, and you as a coach, you're right there, and you got some really talented players that come to you, and it's their life. Like it's not, it's not just a game. It's their livelihood. It's going to impact their children, future generations, and you're there. Well, this is my role now for a certain number of weeks, months, years to help you get there. And when you see that, like for myself, seeing Chris, establish his position in the Raptors rotation this year and, helping out and getting 20-point games and, impacting winning for the Raps was a great source of pride because it's you feel you've helped a human being accomplish what he was there to accomplish.
So, for Aaiden, someone who's a fan and that young and looking up to these guys, what is involved daily for these guys and yourself? Like even with Mississauga, the 905 Raptors, like what is a typical day like for you as a coach and as a players from start to finish?
There's obviously, I'd say 3 types of days for us. There's the practice days, the game days, and the travel days. So we have different schedules depending on what kind of day we are in. But let's say on a typical practice day, coaches would come in the morning. We have our pre-practice meeting, which could go on for like an hour and a half, something like that. We'll talk about some, various stuff, maybe a rewatch last night's, offensive, defensive edits, see what we did well, see what we did not do well, maybe talk about some general things as well, sometimes like roster or, should we play this guy more? Should we play this guy less? Should we try pairing certain players together, like, all the strategy things that can come in, start talking about the next opponent, depending on how many days we got to prepare for the next game, but start talking about, hey, who are we playing next? How are we going to beat them? Do we need to prepare anything special or are we just going to postpone this to tomorrow and see? So, there's a lot of different situations, but typically you have that meeting. Then we're going to finish that meeting by, putting up the practice plan together and making sure we're on the same page in terms of everything we're going to run through in practice. And then we get on the court, and practice typically starts with player development. We're going to work, every coach will get a certain number of players, and we're going to be on the court with them, help them with, developing different types of skills, and then get on the court all together as a team and practice for maybe, an hour, 75 minutes as a group. And then you will have the post-practice stuff where, some players will stay to get some extra shots up. Sometimes as a group, sometimes individually again. Some players will do more, some players will do less. There's also a, get what you need type of phase. Some players that played more minutes, maybe they need less shooting and more recovery with the trainer, whereas the player that played 2 minutes last night, well, he needs a good sweat because, he needs to stay in shape because you can – in the professional world, it seems strange, but you have so many games that if you don't play, starter minutes or heavy rotation minutes, you might untrain yourself a little bit. Like if you're on the bench for a full game and you only you did your warm up and stuff and you played 2 minutes, well, at some point, if somebody goes down with an injury and then, 3 weeks from now, we're asking you to play 25 minutes, you'll be pretty winded. Like you're out of game shape in a certain way. I mean, doesn't mean you're fat, but it means you're not fully ready to play. So it's also our job to, get some players after practice and put them through some workouts because they need it to, stay sharp, stay ready if their role increases suddenly for, unforeseen circumstances. So, so that will typically be post practice. Then coaches will get back again in the coach's office. We will, do a little recap of what happened, anything we want to discuss, any other topics that want to be added. And then typically we break off, a lot of us have children, so it's time to, get home, pick our children from school, and, spend a little bit of family time. And then we'll typically start working again later at night. Like this is the way we work with the 905 is, when kids are in bed, now it's time to work again. So I was grateful and, extremely lucky to have a boss like Coach Jama who, has children and understand those dynamics and allowed us to be fathers and then say, well, there's some more work to do, but we'll postpone that once our kids are in bed. So I prefer doing that than just, staying at work, staying in my office all the time and then coming home and not even see my family. So I'd rather go to bed way later and work at night, but have some quality time with my kids and be able to eat dinner with them. So that's a typical practice day, I would say, for us.
So I think Aaiden would want to know probably on your team from the time that you've been coaching, who is probably the hardest working player that you've seen that's either gone up to the Raptors or maybe left the organization and has gone to another team? And who is probably the most, I guess, down to earth or, like funny or like a joker? And also what players does he have to look forward to coming into the organization that you think are going to be fun to watch?
I mean, fun, down to earth. I mean, I'm thinking immediately of guys like Tyler Ennis that we had this season. I mean, Tyler is one of the greatest players ever from the city of Toronto. Was a first-round pick a few years ago, played 4 years in the league, and unfortunately for him, had that freak injury happen to him when he was playing in Turkey a year and a half ago, and then came to us this year and like extremely humble guy, works hard. I mean, you wouldn't believe he's a guy that's, played in the NBA for many years and stuff. So just an amazing guy to be around and really loved being around him. Another guy that was like that the year before was Jordan Lloyd, who won that championship ring with the Raptors, most famous for being that guy in a suit next to Kawhi Leonard's shot on the picture. But Jordan's an amazing guy. He's having a really, really successful career in Europe right now. I would not be shocked to see him back in the NBA at some point, but just like an amazing guy, an amazing human being to be with and hard worker and completely deserves everything that happens to him. So these guys really stand out. But there's a lot of hard workers, to be honest. We are known as a really, really good G League program where if you come into our program, it's probably because you've been pre-selected. We've done our homework and we know that you're a serious person that will put in the time because that's what we require. So once you're in, you're just fitting in the mold, basically. So I would have to say, well, all the guys we had are pretty hard workers. I mean, not exactly to the same level, but there would be too many guys to just pinpoint one and say, well, this guy really worked hard, because most of these guys work really, really hard. And in terms of who can break out with the Raptors, well, I mean, Chris is kind of already doing it. Won the G League MVP award last year, which was completely deserved. I mean, he really dominated the league, won Defensive Player of the Year as well, and already played a big role for the Raptors this year. Another guy that we hope can trend in that direction is a guy like O'Shea Brissett, who's a Mississauga guy. So it's really fun to help him develop. Another undrafted rookie out of Syracuse came to our program on a 2-way contract with the Raptors and has played some meaningful minutes with the team this season and has, really improved. Like, started the season, had a rough start a little bit in the G League because he was still a very young player coming out of college, did not totally have the skills that were necessary to dominate at the G League level, but the potential was there. And we could really feel over the weeks and months that he really got there and was a very, very impactful player for the 905 in the second part of the season. So we hope that he can be a contributor and a good role player for the Raptors in the years to come.
Who's the best player that you've seen on a court, Charles? Like, whether it's defensively or offensively, whether it's in Europe and they've transitioned over here, or whether it's in this G League, who defensively or offensively is the best player that you've coached against or seen?
Well, if I'm excluding the NBA, obviously, because like I haven't coached the NBA guys, but I've seen them, in front of my eyes a lot. But the guys I coached or coached against in the G League and in Europe. Well, the year I was in Europe, I mean, the year we played EuroLeague, the highest level in 2013-14, Bojan Bogdanovic was one of the EuroLeague top scorers. He's a really good player for the Utah Jazz right now. Bogdanovic was also on one of the teams. I mean, there was a bunch of fantastic players for those teams. I mean, Linus Kleise was playing at that time, was really good, but was more on the downside of his career. Juan Carlos Navarro, a EuroLeague legend, one of the top 5 or 6 EuroLeague players of all time, played for Barcelona, was in his prime when we faced him. So a lot of really, really good players. Moscow had a bunch of really good guys as well. Not guys that perform well in the NBA, but amazing EuroLeague players. From a G League standpoint, I would say, well, Chris Boucher is definitely one of them. I mean, he was the best player alongside Jordan Lloyd last year for the Raptors 905, won the G League MVP. So those two were amazing for us. This year, I mean, guys like Henry Ellenson, Tyler Ennis, Paul Watson, so really, really, really good players. And that we faced, the two that would stand out the most, I would say, were Christian Wood, who played for the Wisconsin Herd last year and now is, has a really good impact and is probably going to get a good contract on the free agent market this summer because he's played some meaningful minutes and contributed really well for the Detroit Pistons this year. But he was unstoppable in the G League. Like, he was really the guy that could match up to Chris Boucher and like score on him. Like, really, you could feel like, hey, Chris might not be the best player in this matchup. Like, maybe he is, but it's not an obvious thing that Chris is going to kill this matchup like he does almost every game. Christian Wood was that one guy you would say, well, Chris might get 30 points and 12 rebounds, but Christian Wood might get 30 points and 12 rebounds as well. And the best pure scorer was Jordan McRae for the Capital City Go-Go, played for the Washington Wizards, and he's bounced around the league. He was with Denver at some point this season. I'm not sure if he's still there. But Jordan McRae was a complete scoring machine. I remember fun game in Mississauga last year. There was the final time we played them. And so I think they had 2 or 3 starters injured that night. So, and Capital City was my scout. So I'm preparing Jamo for the game and I'm telling him, well, you know what? They're going to be down a few guys. So we got to be really careful about McRae because he's almost the only weapon they have right now, but he's I think he was on a 9-game, like 9 30-point games in a row, something like that kind of streak. And so we're facing them, and I'm telling, well, basically they don't have anyone else, so we're going to have to, shift all of our focus to him. It's not as if we have to stop the other guys. Like, he's going to be the guy taking all the shots, and we're going to have to try to win the game. So we ended up winning the game. We did everything we could to stop, and I think he scored 47 in the game. Like, we just couldn't do anything to stop Jordan McRae, which just tells you how good he is offensively. So he's the one scorer that I would say completely stood out in my 2 years in the G League.
So, like I said, we were looking at getting into a game this up, hopefully when everything gets back to normal. We were actually looking at seats right behind the bench. There was a few games they were there and then they were gone. For a guy like him, how close is he to the action if we end up securing seats right next to the bench? There's the bench seats there. I think he'd kind of like to know how that action is, or how close are those fans to the bench to where you guys are drawing up plays or chatting or just chit-chatting and stuff like that?
Well, if you're behind the bench, you're, I don't know, probably 15 to 20 feet from our bench, basically. I mean, it's a hockey arena, so it has that configuration where the first row is basically, behind the boards. But the closest you can get is be like right on the baseline next to our bench. Because if you're on the baseline right there, you're literally like 5 feet away from the court, and you could be facing the players, like you're almost sitting on the bench with us if you're on the first baseline seats. So that's the closest you can get, because you could almost talk to the players while they're there. You're actually a little bit closer if you're on the baseline than if you are behind the bench.
So, his biggest thing when he heard you were coming on, and obviously I explained how organizations work. It's all one big giant team. You're all rewarded rings. I told him yours is probably at home and locked up in a secure spot, because he was like, would he have it? And I'm like, it depends where he is. If he's at home. What was the feeling for you, first of all, when the organization was pushing strong through the playoffs and finally won it? What was the feeling like for that? And what was the feeling like with the trophy, the parade, and getting your ring? How do you describe or walk us through all that?
It's an unbelievable feeling, because, even if I'm coaching for the 905, I'm not on the Raptors staff, but it's kind of one big family too. Like, we do summer league together in the summer, and we're invited to come through various phases of the season, whether being mini camps in the summer or the September workouts at OVO, where, some 905 coaches jump in as well. So you feel included in all of that. And then you're part of that big, party. You're on the bus, for the parade, and you get your championship ring, as you mentioned, and you take your pictures with the Larry O'Brien trophy. So when you grew up around the game like I did, and you pick up a basketball, and it's an amazing feeling just to play basketball when you're 10, 11, 12 years old. And then you keep playing and follow the NBA and dream about it and put posters on your wall. And you're seeing all those NBA finals where you watch, like when I was growing up, Michael Jordan wins championships, and, Shaq and Kobe and these people. And then one day you're holding that same trophy, basically. And then you kind of came full circle a little bit. And then, you hear about what at a very young age what the championship ring is, like whether it being a Stanley Cup ring or a World Series or Super Bowl ring or NBA championship ring. So about that. Like, I happened to wear a Super Bowl ring once when I was a kid, because my uncle was really close to the San Francisco 49ers organization. So when I went to San Francisco and I met with some of his friends, like one of them was wearing a Super Bowl ring. So I put it on my finger. I was like, wow, I'm wearing a Super Bowl ring. But like, I never envisioned that one day, like like when I started coaching, of course, it's your dream to reach the NBA at some point and to get there. But it's like, it seems as if you would dream about winning an NBA championship, it might be pushing the envelope a little too much. Like, it's not even in your mind. You're just trying to reach the NBA and try to be as good as you can. And maybe if you're in a position to win one, well, that's great. But that's not like the first thing on your mind, or you're dreaming about it just like a kid would dream about it. And then all of a sudden it happens. And then the Raptors were pushing through in the playoffs, and they were getting close to beating the Warriors and stuff. And we're up 3-1 in the series. And then, we hadn't accomplished it yet. But at some point you're like, in game 6, when we were about to win, I'm like, man, we're going to be NBA champions. Like this is for real. And it's not just like everybody in Canada is happy for the Raptors, but I'm within that organization. And eventually they told us we were going to be on the parade. We were going to get our championship rings. And then that ring comes and it has like with your name on it, and you're wearing it. And you're like, wow, this is that thing I knew about for decades. I knew that existed, but it's like, how many human beings get to have one at some point in their lives? Like, not many. It's just like an Olympic gold medal in a certain way. So, and it has your name on it, which makes it even like more precious. And you're like, man, I could never imagine I would have one of these one day. So it was just an amazing feeling and a great thing for me that it happened in Toronto. It happened in Canada, for me being Canadian, going all around the world. It was kind of like, validating the journey a little bit. And not that the journey is over. I'm only 39 years old right now. I mean, hopefully I can coach. I'm healthy enough to coach for 25 to 30 more years. But it was already like, something that told me, well, you sacrificed a lot over the years, and, here's one way of being rewarded. You get that, and nobody can take that away from you.
So you have young kids of your own, and your family, like maybe I guess more so your kids, are they old enough to fully understand? Or when all this went down, were they? I mean, they got the pictures with the trophy with you guys as a family, and the rings at home. Are they fully really understanding to the gist of how big of a deal that is, or are they learning more and more as they grow up with you being around the organization?
I mean, my oldest son, Julius, I think he realizes. I mean, he just turned 5, so he was 4 when the Raptors won. But I think he was old enough because he came to many games, so he saw a lot of Raptors games last season. He comes to all the 905 games as well. So I think he gets that. Like he gets it that it was a big thing that we won the championship. And he was so happy because he's a Raptors fan, and he was so happy to see them win. My youngest son, who was 2.5 at the time, who's now 3.5, I mean, he could tell you that the Raptors won the championship. He kind of knows. I don't think he fully gets it. The thing that was hard, I mean, I don't think Julius, the oldest one, realizes that. I don't think he realizes how hard it is to win, because we literally moved to Toronto. And it was, my first year in the, true NBA world. I mean, I was associated with the Spurs here and there before, and he would kind of know what the Spurs were, but he wasn't fully immersed in it until he came to Toronto. And then he came to some games and was, wearing Kawhi Leonard jerseys and stuff. So really, like, he saw that. And then the funny thing that happened is, like I mentioned earlier, I'm a big San Francisco 49ers fan since I'm a kid.
Yeah.
And the 49ers almost won the Super Bowl. So it was his first year following pro football. We were watching games together on Sunday afternoons. And then the 49ers were almost always winning. And then, we almost won the Super Bowl, which was unexpected. And then, unfortunately, we blew that lead. But I was like, man, our sports team will not win a championship every year. This is just not how it works.
Yeah.
But I think he just, like, we with the Raptors, we're expecting to win it again this year. We fully believe that we got a great chance of repeating. So I'm telling Julius, we might win it again this year, but it's not a given thing that for the next 30 years, Daddy's team will win the championship every year. Like, this is just how it works.
Yeah, so, and I mean, and as well as I do, I mean, I hate to say it with COVID and all that stuff, but I mean, you guys at the big club at the top, before the season ended or was put on hold, there was some. In Toronto, Gasol pulled his hammy. Guys were injured, and it was like, holy cow! They couldn't keep guys in the rotation healthy, and this time off might actually be beneficial for the recovery. And it's funny how you brought up about the chance of winning. Well, I had Darian Barnes, who I was a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan years ago when my daughter was born, and I'm a Patriots and a Buccaneers fan, and you can see that Gronkowski and Brady are now with the Patriots, so it worked out for me. But Darian Barnes won a Super Bowl with them. He was on my show, and he won it in his rookie year. Never saw it again after, right? So you just realize in sports, A, how difficult it is to win at what I would say are the best leagues in the world, and B, like you said, even if you're not winning, but you're constantly contending, like you said, year in and year out, the Raptors organization is up there when you look in the East, whether it's top 4, top 3, top 2. It could end at any minute. And, I think you're right with this year. It's there. I also think, yes, there's times for guys to leave in the next year or two after, but there's still a core. There's still guys that can be re-signed, and there's still free agents, big free agents that can be brought in. And Toronto is one of those places. Yeah, it's a little cold. It's a little windy. I mean, it hasn't been that cold the last few years, but in the summertime, it's a beautiful place. When you've got playoff basketball happening, it's a beautiful city to be playing for. do you think Toronto has become a big market city for a small market? What I'm saying is, you have LA, right? You have, you're hearing about the Clippers, the Lakers now. They're attracting everybody. Milwaukee's trying to do that out there with what they've got, even though they're a smaller market team. Do you think Toronto has now said we're a legitimate contender? We are kind of like the Red Sox, the Yankees. We can be like the Patriots at the top and offer a good place for free agents to come and play?
There's a few brands in in sports, in basketball, like the Lakers or the Yankees, in baseball, the Red Sox you mentioned. Like, these teams are, they're 100 years old, or feels like it. In some cases they're literally more than 100 years old. But it's hard to say Toronto is the Lakers or the Yankees. But I feel like it's a known thing around the league right now that Toronto's a very nice city. It's very cool to be there. The players really like it over there. Even if Kawhi Leonard left, he only said good things about what Toronto was and how great it was to be in Toronto. It was more for him a matter of being home than anything else. So competing with those big markets, and you can't really compete with the weather of Southern California, right? But Toronto's an amazing city, like you mentioned, and I think players know it. I think a lot of players around the league love to come play in Toronto. Every people around the league I've talked to, they mentioned Toronto is one of their favorite cities to travel to. So I think they made themselves cool. Like, they have the Raptors have a swagger that they didn't have 10 years ago. And that was brought by...
Is that El Presidente? Is that the president? You think that has a lot to do with that?
Well, he sets the culture, so he's the main responsible for that.
I've heard so many guys say such great things about him. And I think even, some of the players that were discovered in the NBA were through him. So they got their start kind of, because of him. This was before Raptors times. And I'm just hearing about love and respect for the guy.
Yeah, no, exactly. And a great human being to start with. And when you see even what he does outside of the Raptors, like the Giants of Africa Foundation, everything us to empower, Africans and women and just a great human being overall. So, and a guy that sets the tone and that demands excellence at every level of the organization. So when you walk into the building, well, you're running into great, competent people at every level. So, and it comes like year in and year out. So when you add it up, well, people will say great things about the Raptors. And then you have a guy like Drake that comes in and that, brings in a coolness factor to the team on top of it. And he's from Toronto. And then the Raptors are successful on the court, and they have, a creative coach, that everybody likes around the league, and Nick Nurse, and you have some really fun players to watch. Kawhi was a mega star in himself last year, but like guys like Pascal Siakam, Kyle Lowry, Fred, like these guys are very respected and popular around the league. And then you could bring in a guy like Serge Ibaka, who's got a great personality on top of it, Marc Gasol. Serge keeps repeating all the time how much he loves Toronto, how much he loves to be here. So when you add all of that up, you kind of see what the writing on the wall is. It's pretty cool. It's pretty fun to be in Toronto. It's a nice organization, and we have the reputation for doing things right in terms of player development and all that. So, as a player, hey, I'm going to a really serious organization that does things right in a great city with great culture around it. So that has become, the attractiveness of the Toronto Raptors. Now, competing with LA is always going to be hard. Like with Miami, you'll never have South Beach on Lake Ontario, but it's a great city, and it just is. So you compete with what you have.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that. 2009, I want to say, it might have been 2009. I went and saw Pearl Jam at Molson Amphitheater there on the outdoors in August, and actually, Eddie Vedder spoke about the Toronto Islands during the concert. That he came in, and apparently they jumped on either kayak or either paddle boards, and they were out there, and he was like, "Man, this is like." He didn't expect to see this kind of right by a city, but Eddie Vedder is more of that surf type and that South Coast type, and for him to kind of be mesmerized by the beauty of it, and he thought he was in his own little world inside of what he thought still to be a mega city, was pretty unique on its own, right? How you brought up Drake. How important is something like that for basketball culture with an organization? Okay, so Jack Nicholson, Spike Lee, Drake, all those guys. Is like, do fans love that? I mean, I guess you got the super fan guy there too. Like, is that? Do you think? Like, do you guys have any? I mean, I know it's Mississauga. I used to go to watch the Steelheads play there with my business in that. It's the Hershey Center where you guys are, right? The food. They've changed the name of it now, but I mean, is that important to the Raptors to have that built into the culture? And do you guys have anything unique at your level?
Yeah, I mean, it's we at our level, we have people we see every game. Like, there's fans that are there, and we recognize them, and it's fun to see them because we can feel how passionate they are about our team. And yes, it's important to have that in your culture, 100%. Like, I feel like the fact that you have like Spike Lee in New York or Jack Nicholson in LA, or these people that you commonly see at games, like it's kind of like an icon. It's kind of like a mascot in a certain way. And it's another level of attachment from, like, a team, a city, a fan base. It's kind of like it's like a whole validation in some kind of way. But and when you add Drake to the Toronto Raptors, well, you're talking about a homegrown kid who's made it, who's extremely successful at what he does. He's the biggest, album seller in the last decade. So you put him, and he's on the court, and he cares, and he's passionate about it. And like you mentioned, super fan being there. And like, so now you have those Toronto trademarks, around the Toronto Raptors organization. And now you have the foundation of saying, like, well, those are like cultural landmarks in a certain way that you would have in other cities like LA and like New York. And now you have it in Toronto. So this is what makes the Toronto Raptors cool in a certain way, because, the kids, the teenagers, and a lot of adults, they will relate to that because they listen to music and they say, well, it's cool. There's a game. Oh, here's Drake. And like, so it goes all together, and I think it makes your team cool. It gives a swag, and you need that to sell more and to be a successful business and to attract people. Like, players see that and say, well, what they have in place is really cool right now.
Yeah, it's funny. It's unique. It's cool and it's unique because before everything got shut down, I'm not a huge basketball guy to know everything in and out. I still love it enough to watch it. Before the day everything got shut down, I got 11 out of 12 games right for college for the NCAA. So I follow it enough to know with winning and losing and teams. But it's the only sport I know that allows someone like a Drake, a Jack, or any of those guys to pretty much walk 3 or 4 steps onto the freaking court in a game. It's the only, you don't see it in hockey, you don't see it in football, you don't see it in baseball. Like, is that common for those? Like, how or why are they? I mean, Drake is different. I think Drake is part of the organization. If I'm not wrong, I don't know about Jack and those guys, but like, originally, how are they able to kind of just get onto the court 2 or 3 steps and even clap in players, their faces? Like, literally, if a player did it from the Raptors to them, it would be like a technical, but yet they're out there like, and I'm like, man, how are they allowed to do that? But it's unique, right? I mean, to me, it's unique that they're allowed to do that. And I do see opposing players look at Drake and they're friends apparently off the court, right? So it's at the time it's kind of heated and it's like trying to get under his skin. But I guess it's all in good fun, but it is unique. And is that cool for you? Like, meaning the uniqueness that the game offers that? Because fans, I think, love it. I mean, to an extent.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I mean, it's all good for the game. We all love the same thing, which is the game of basketball. And I think that proximity I think it's good for the game. I think it's unique to basketball, to your point. And, whatever makes your game unique, you should probably keep it, as long as it doesn't interfere with how the game's played. And it doesn't. It's just like it's a fine line to walk, but as long as nobody's truly bothered by what's happening, I mean, it's why wouldn't LeBron James have a conversation with Drake when he comes and plays in Toronto right there, and why wouldn't Drake say something to LeBron James if he knows him and there's a, call going against him and they would argue that. I think it just like spices things up a little bit, it's all in good fun. I mean, there's no harm behind it. And I think it's something to enjoy, the proximity of the fans at basketball games. Like, as long as you don't have bad things happening, like what happened to Kyle Lowry when he fell into the stands. Like, so that's what you have to prevent, and you have to protect players, just like you have to protect fans. But as long as it's, it's all love, I mean, we're all sharing the passion for the same thing, and we're, enjoying it to the fullest, basically.
Well, I chuckle and laugh because I remember during that playoff run, it was like, I remember one play happened. It might have been defensively, and I just remember Drake doing a fist pump, kind of like that, and then he walked over to the bench, and it was literally like Nick was watching a play, and he's sitting there like this, and Drake almost kind of like hugged him a bit like that, and then then after it was done, he kind of turned and grabbed him after, and it was kind of funny to see it because he was so focused on the play, but it was almost like Drake knew the hammer was down, it was done, and we were either moving on to the next round. But you could see Nick's face, just the intensity, and it's almost like, like he didn't, and then he turned and seen it was Drake, right? And it was like he just kind of opened his arms up a bit, and Drake just kind of put his arms around him. And I think fans kind of got that whole thing of like, it's Drake, it's, he was a kid like us, he was a sports fan like us, he was into music like he is. And yeah, he is up there like echelon famous, but it's almost like, as a fan, you're watching him reach out to the coach and do that. It's kind of like he's sharing it all for us, kind of, because he's the only one that can really hug him there for us, but we all feel the same way, like, so I think it's very unique. So I guess my last couple questions here, because it's been, like I said, it's been an hour, it goes quick, is, is there anything you would have changed? I guess obviously the answer is probably no right now, that, but I have to ask you straight up, is there anything over your course of the basketball coaching, or even whatever days that you played, was there anything that you would have done differently or changed along the way up until this point that you are here now?
I don't think I would have changed anything. Obviously, I'm happy with the way my life has gone and the way I've navigated through the challenges of coaching and, being in different places. I've been really fortunate to, get really good opportunities, good opportunity to coach pro when I was 25 years old. Even my first project which was building a high school program, led to a provincial championship. And, then going to Europe and winning championships over there, going to China, having a successful year with an expansion team, finishing in first place on a personal standpoint, with winning a Coach of the Year award as a first year in Asia, jumping on to a well-renowned NBA organization, summer league program like the Spurs, and then coming back home to be with the Toronto Raptors. I mean, it doesn't get, any better than that. And, meanwhile, being able to, have my family, my children, I mean, they travel around the world with me and my wife, and it's just like our family's there. We're there to support for each other. So like, I wouldn't change anything. So hopefully the future has some great things ahead, but I can't complain for what the past has been for me.
So the last question I have is, you and I get it. I mean, I work with hockey players with our agency. So I'm constantly telling clients that, you don't get drafted. It's not the end of the world, that there's other routes. There's a lot of players that have made it, and made it to me doesn't mean the NHL or the NBA. Made it could be the American Hockey League or European Pro, just like the G League in Europe. Is there any advice you have? And I mean, you and I are both Canadian, and I mean, you're with the Raptors. It can be specifically for young Canadian athletes, or, I've got listeners from Europe and I have listeners from the States. Do you have any last advice to the next young basketball player coming up? And what would that advice be?
Keep working, keep grinding, stay humble. The combination to me of humility and hard work is the greatest accelerator for somebody that has potential. Like if you have a potential to be good, stay humble, keep learning, have some awareness that you don't know everything, and that coaches will teach you some stuff. Be coachable, and never believe that you've made it, because every step is only a step. Like, you'll never really be satisfied until you're, I don't know, LeBron James or Kawhi Leonard. So, because if you feel like you've accomplished something when you reach college, well, guess what? I mean, only, a small percentage of these players will end up being pro players. And when you make it as a pro player, you're drafted. Well, guess what? A lot of guys will be out of the league in 5 years. So you need to stay humble, know where you are, know who you are, and keep working hard, because there's a lot of people that like basketball. They're coming after you, just like you're coming after the generation that was before you. So stay humble, work hard, and great things will happen.
Charles, I appreciate you taking the time and jumping on with me. It was awesome chatting with you. Sorry about my little guy. Like I said, he's shy, but I could see there he was listening to, the guys that you work with and what it's like. I'm hoping that once things clear out here, you guys get back to normal. You guys get back at building within. Like I said, we're gonna head out to the arena at some point once everything gets back to normal. I want to get my guy as close to the action as I can and actually get into the G League a lot, so that he can see what those guys might be working for, which is the next level. So I want to wish you success at the G level, as well as the parent club. And hopefully everything gets back to normal as soon as possible. I want to wish your family well. Stay safe and all the health.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Charles. Take care.